Jack Morgan squinted at the rising sun as he pulled his well-worn USPS delivery truck into a quiet street of Clearwater, Texas. The small town nestled deep in the heart of the Lone Star State wore its history proudly. Faded pastel homes, overgrown lawns, and the lingering scent of magnolias mixed with the hum of everyday life. Every morning, as the first hints of spring light danced on the cracked sidewalks, Jack felt a comforting familiarity in the slow rhythms of Clearwater. Yet today, something was off. Jack's truck rumbled gently as he reviewed his delivery list on a faded clipboard. His eyes, sharp and observant from decades on the job, caught a peculiar detail on one of the packages. Taped to the side of a medium-sized, scuffed brown box was a scrap of paper with childish handwriting. The note read, "We need help. Please call 911. It was unsigned, and the ink was smudged, as though written in a hurry or with trembling hands. "Simon, what is this all about?" Jack muttered to himself, his brow furrowing. His heart thumped in a way that reminded him to trust his gut, a gut that had served him well over the years. Gripping the steering wheel a little tighter, Jack flipped on his truck's radio. "Hey, Eddie, you copy? I just got a delivery that's off. The note says, we need help. Think it's a prank?" A crackly voice responded from the radio speaker. "That's strange, Jack. Could be nothing, but you know better than to ignore a gut feeling. Keep your eyes peeled, buddy." Jack nodded, even though Eddie couldn't see him. He knew this was a mere joke. The package was addressed to Ashley Green at 312 Magnolia Lane, a modest, worn house in one of Clearwater's older neighborhoods. Jack recalled that Magnolia Lane was lined with ancient oak trees whose sprawling branches whispered secrets of days gone by. The address was as familiar as the back of his hand, yet today its silence felt ominous. Jack parked his truck along the cracked curb and stepped out into the crisp morning air. The gentle Texas sun illuminated the peeling white paint of the house, the faded blue door, and a sagging porch that told a tale of better times. He approached the front door and rapped twice. No response. He tried the doorbell, and the sound echoed into the quiet. After waiting a few long, uneasy moments, he knocked firmly again. A rustle came from inside, followed by the soft patter of small feet. The door creaked open just a crack, revealing a pair of wide, frightened eyes peering out from the shadows. A little girl, no older than 7, stood there wearing a faded pink dress and clinging to the doorframe. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Mommy?" she asked, eyes glistening with unshed tears. Jack's heart ached at the sight. "Hey there, sweetheart. I'm Jack. I've got a package for Ashley Green. Is your mom around?" The girl hesitated, her eyes darting behind her. She isn't here," she replied, her voice trembling. Before Jack could inquire further, another pair of little feet scampered into view, a twin sister, nearly identical, with a matching dress and equally terrified eyes. The twins, Emily and Lily, stood silently for a moment, their small faces a blend of hope and fear. "Are you okay?" Jack asked gently, lowering himself to their eye level. "I'm here to help, but I need to know what is going on. Where is your mom?" Lily's soft voice quivered. We were hungry." A chill ran down Jack's spine. Hunger in a child is one thing, but the combination of fear and hunger in these tiny faces struck him as deeply unsettling. "Sweethearts, let me call 911 and get you some help," Jack said, his tone both firm and reassuring. He pulled out his phone and dialed, his fingers trembling just slightly as he explained the situation. Within minutes, the sound of sirens reached his ears, a bittersweet melody of relief and tension. Jack stayed by the door, watching as Officer Ryan Thompson, an earnest man in his mid-40s, with a kind yet steely gaze, stepped forward with his radio in hand. "Good morning, ma'am. I'm Officer Thompson. Can you tell me what happened?" he asked as he approached the door, addressing the little girl who had been left behind. The twins clung to each other, their eyes pleading for reassurance. Before the officer could get a full answer, the door swung open further, revealing a disheveled man in his early 40s with tired eyes and a stuttering voice. I just stepped out for a minute," he stammered, trying to brush off the growing concern on everyone's face. "The girls are fine. I just went out to grab some groceries." Jack's experienced eyes caught every nuance the man's forced smile, the slight tremble in his voice, and the way the twins' eyes darted away when he spoke. "Sir," Jack interjected gently, "the girls told me they're hungry, and I noticed you were in a hurry to come back. Can you explain?" The man, who introduced himself as Brandon Green, hesitated, glancing nervously from Jack to Officer Thompson. "I was only gone a few minutes, really. I'll be right back with the groceries," he insisted, his voice a mix of frustration and forced cheerfulness. Officer Thompson's eyes narrowed, and he placed a calm yet authoritative hand on Brandon's shoulder. "We'll need to check on the children, sir. Stay right here until we verify everything," he said. The tension in the air was palpable, and Jack felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders as he knelt beside the twins. "Hey, you two, it's all right," Jack murmured softly, reaching out to gently pat their backs. "I'm going to make sure you're safe. Just stay with me, okay?" Inside, the house was dimly lit and oddly quiet. The front hallway smelled faintly of stale air and disuse. As the officer led Brandon away for further questioning, Jack escorted Emily and Lily to his truck. He carefully tucked the mysterious package into the passenger seat and offered them warm bottled water from a cooler he always kept for emergencies. Sitting in the cab of his truck, Jack couldn't shake the uneasy feeling. The note on the package, the hungry whispers of the little ones, and Brandon's shaky explanations all pointed to something deeper, a hidden story buried beneath the mundane surface of a daily delivery. Back at his truck, Jack reviewed the address on the package again. The label was printed in neat block letters, but the note was so raw, so desperate. "We need help. Please call 911. It almost seemed like a cry from a corner of a broken heart. Jack's mind raced. Who would send such a note? And why was it attached to a package meant for Ashley Green? Jack dialed the office on his radio, his voice low and steady despite the storm brewing inside. "This is Jack Morgan. I have a situation at 312 Magnolia Lane. The package I delivered has a note asking for help, and the kids seem scared. I'm holding them in my truck for now. Please advise." A pause crackled over the radio before a gruff voice replied, "Keep them safe, Jack. We're sending someone over. Don't take any unnecessary risks." Jack exhaled slowly, glancing down at the twins. "I promise, girls. I'm gonna make sure you're all right," he said, his tone gentle yet resolute. Over the next half hour, as the police continued their questioning and Brandon's explanations grew increasingly muddled, Jack remained by the truck. He listened to snippets of conversation through the open window, a mix of hushed tones, stifled sobs, and murmurs of confusion from neighbors who had gathered at a distance. The once peaceful Magnolia Lane now felt like the stage for a troubled drama unfolding in real time. In that time, Jack's mind wandered back to his own life. Growing up in Clearwater, he had learned early the value of community, how every neighbor's watchful eye and every kind gesture could make all the difference. He remembered his father's words, "Son, always trust your instincts. When something feels off, it usually is." And today, every instinct in his body was screaming that something was terribly wrong. Just as Jack was about to settle back into a cautious wait, his radio crackled again. "Jack, this is Eddie. I'm picking up another delivery nearby. It's for a Mr. Parker at 217 Pine Street. You might want to check it out," came the message. Jack hesitated. A delivery wasn't usually a reason to leave a scene, especially not when children were involved. But something about Eddie's tone, a note of urgency behind the routine, nudged him. "Copy that, Eddie. I'll swing by Pine Street in a few minutes," he responded, his voice betraying the conflict between duty and his nagging worry. Before departing, Jack took one last look at Magnolia Lane. Through the window of a nearby house, he caught a glimpse of a woman peering anxiously from behind drawn curtains. Her eyes, filled with sorrow and fear, seemed to silently beg for help. It was Ashley Green, the real recipient of the package, and she looked like she had a secret too heavy to bear. Determined to get answers, Jack started his truck and drove off toward Pine Street, the early morning light stretching across the horizon as if heralding a new, uncertain day. Jack's south journey down Pine Street was a blend of routine and revelation. The street was lined with modest houses, each telling its own story. He passed by a small diner where a faded neon sign buzzed intermittently, the aroma of strong coffee and sizzling bacon drifting through the air. Jack couldn't help but feel that every detail, every sound, held a hidden meaning. At 217 Pine Street, the delivery was for a Mr. Parker, an unfamiliar name to Jack, yet one that struck him as strangely similar to his own. The building was a modest, two-story home with a wraparound porch and a well-kept front yard. Jack knocked on the door, and after a brief pause, an older gentleman with kind, weathered eyes answered. "Good morning," Jack greeted, smiling warmly as he held out the package. "I have a delivery for Mr. Parker." The man, who introduced himself as Robert Parker, took the package with a nod and a half smile. "Thank you, son. Been waiting on this for a while," he said in a gravelly voice that carried both fatigue and gratitude. Before Jack could inquire further, Robert added, "You're a good man, you know. Not many would notice the little details." Jack simply nodded, though his mind was now a tangled web of questions. Who was Mr. Parker? And what did his name have to do with the unfolding mystery on Magnolia Lane? Robert's words echoed in his mind as he drove away, the weight of unspoken truths pressing down on him. Throughout the rest of his route that day, Jack's thoughts churned with concern. Every address, every familiar face, seemed to mask a hidden story. He encountered other deliveries, a mix of mundane packages, and a few with unusual markings, but none compared to the disturbing note he'd found that morning. With each stop, his resolve grew stronger. He wouldn't let fear paralyze him. Instead, he would piece together the clues, however small, to uncover the truth behind the plea for help. Late in the afternoon, as the golden light of dusk began to filter through the trees, Jack returned to Magnolia Lane. The police had wrapped up their initial questioning, and Brandon Green had been taken aside for further investigation. Standing near the truck, Jack saw Ashley Green, her face etched with worry and exhaustion. Her eyes met his, and for a moment, an unspoken understanding passed between them. "Mr. Morgan," Ashley said softly as she approached, her voice heavy with a mix of relief and sorrow. "Thank you for staying. I didn't know who else to trust." Jack's heart clenched at the raw emotion in her voice. "Ma'am, I just did what I felt was right. Your girls, they deserve to be safe." Ashley's eyes shimmered with tears. I'm so sorry. I wasn't there when they needed me." Jack reached out and gently touched her arm. "It's not your fault, Ashley. Sometimes life forces us into situations we never imagined. But we'll get through this." In the quiet moments that followed, the weight of the day bore down on them both. Jack listened as Ashley recounted fragments of her troubled life, her struggle to balance work and caring for her two daughters, the suffocating control of Brandon, and the desperate attempts she'd made to protect her family. Her voice wavered as she admitted, "There are things happening, secrets that I can't seem to escape. I don't know what to do anymore." Jack's mind raced. The note, the missing groceries, The uneasy glances, everything now pointed toward a web of deception that stretched far beyond a simple delivery mishap. He promised himself then that he would not let this case slip away into darkness. His duty wasn't limited to delivering mail, it was about protecting the community, about being the voice for those who could not speak for themselves. As night fell over Clearwater, the town's usually quiet streets took on an eerie stillness. Jack returned to his truck, parked under a solitary street lamp that cast long, haunting shadows. The hum of cicadas mingled with the distant murmur of a radio news report about a rising number of domestic disturbances in the area. Jack's thoughts churned, and he pulled out the note once more, running his fingers over the trembling script. "We need help. Please call 911. He whispered, "I'm going to find out who needs help, and I'm not going to stop until I do." Inside his truck, as he sat alone in the dim light, Jack began to piece together a mental map of the day's events. Every detail, from the frightened faces of Emily and Lily to the secretive glances exchanged by Ashley, formed a mosaic of clues. He scribbled notes on a small notepad, capturing names, addresses, and his own gut impressions. He wrote, "Magnolia Lane, 312 urgent note, hungry children. Pine Street, 217 mysterious Mr. Parker, possible link. Brandon Green erratic behavior, forced explanation. Ashley Green a mother caught in a nightmare, desperate for escape." The ticking of the dashboard clock echoed in the quiet of the truck, a reminder that time was both an enemy and an ally. Jack resolved that tomorrow, at first light, he would start digging deeper. He would visit local businesses, speak with neighbors, and even return to the Green residence to ask questions. His intuition told him that this was only the beginning, a small spark that might ignite a larger blaze of secrets. Before drifting into a restless sleep in his modest motel room that night, Jack reread his notes and promised himself that he would be the guiding light for those lost in darkness. Outside, the humid Texas night embraced Clearwater, holding its breath as if aware that its very soul was about to be tested. The next morning, the town awoke to a brisk, early spring day. Jack, determined yet weary from the events of the previous day, pulled on his faded denim jacket and stepped out into the light. The sky was a clear blue, but the brightness did little to erase the shadows of doubt and concern that clung to him. Jack's first stop was the local diner, a small, family-owned establishment called Mama's Kitchen that had served Clearwater residents for generations. The diner's neon sign buzzed softly as he entered, and the comforting aroma of freshly brewed coffee and sizzling bacon greeted him. Jack settled into a corner booth and ordered a cup of coffee, his mind already racing through plans for the day. "Morning, Jack," called out Sally, the diner's owner, from behind the counter. "You look like you've got a lot on your mind." "Rough day yesterday?" Jack offered a small, tired smile. "You could say that, Sally. Just a lot of things that don't add up, you know how it is." Sally's eyes softened with empathy. Clearwater's a quiet town, but even here, sometimes secrets come knocking. "Just be careful, Jack. I've seen enough heartbreak around these parts." Jack nodded, savoring the warmth of the coffee. He scribbled a few notes on a napkin as planned for the day, speak to a few neighbors, check in on the Green residence again, and maybe visit the local post office for any additional clues. As he finished his coffee, Jack stepped outside into the bright morning sun. The streets bustled with life, children on bicycles, elderly folks chatting on their porches, and the steady hum of commerce. Yet beneath it all, Jack sensed an undercurrent of tension, a subtle worry that something was amiss. His next stop was the Green home at 312 Magnolia Lane. The house now looked even more forlorn under the weight of unanswered questions. Jack parked his truck along the curb and walked up the creaking steps. He hesitated at the door, gathering his resolve, then knocked firmly. After several long moments, the door swung open to reveal Ashley Green again. Her eyes, still red from tears, met his with a glimmer of hope. "Jack, you came back," she said softly. "Of course," Jack replied, his voice steady and reassuring. "I want to help, Ashley. I need to know what has been happening here. Can we talk?" They sat in the living room, a modest space decorated with faded photographs and mementos of happier times. Ashley recounted her struggles in a hushed tone, her words interspersed with long pauses as she fought back tears. She spoke of Brandon's growing temper, his increasingly erratic behavior, and the overwhelming sense of isolation that had descended upon her. The twins, Emily and Lily, peered from a corner, their eyes large and wary. "I tried to keep it all together for the girls, Jack," Ashley admitted, her voice trembling. "But every time I leave them alone, I fear something terrible will happen. And now that note. I don't understand who could be behind it or why." Jack listened intently, his mind absorbing every detail. "Ashley, did you notice anything unusual before the note was attached to the package? Any new faces around? Any odd deliveries?" She shook her head slowly. "Not really, but Brandon has been different lately. He has been secretive, disappearing for hours without a word. I tried calling him, but he always gives me some excuse about groceries or work." Jack jotted down every word in his small notebook. "I'm going to look into this further," he promised. "I have a few leads I need to follow up on. In the meantime, please keep the girls safe, and if you notice anything out of the ordinary, call me immediately." Ashley managed a weak smile. "Thank you, Jack. I don't know what I'd do without someone like you around." After leaving the greenhouse, Jack felt both a surge of determination and a heavy responsibility. The threads of this mystery were tangled and deep, and he knew that uncovering the truth would not be easy. Driving through Clearwater's winding streets, Jack replayed Ashley's words and the eerie note in his mind. Each detail, no matter how small, was a clue leading him closer to a hidden truth that threatened to shatter the fragile peace of this small town. That evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in hues of orange and pink, Jack found himself at his modest apartment near the town center. He spread out his notes on the small kitchen table, connecting names, addresses, and observations with careful precision. The piece of paper with the desperate plea sat at the center of his map of clues. With each connection, the puzzle grew larger, a network of secrets involving family struggles, mysterious deliveries, and perhaps even criminal activity. Jack's thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. He opened it to find Officer Thompson standing there, his face etched with concern and determination. "Jack, can I come in?" he asked quietly. "Of course," Jack replied, stepping aside. Inside, the two men sat down at the table. Officer Thompson spread out his own set of documents and began to share what he had learned. "We've been looking into Brandon Green's background, and there are some red flags. He has had several run-ins with the law before minor offenses, mostly related to alcohol and disorderly conduct. But there is also talk of him being involved with some unsavory characters around town," Thompson explained. Jack listened, his eyes narrowing. "Unsavory characters? Like what?" Thompson leaned in, lowering his voice. "There's a name that keeps coming up, Marcus Simmons, also known as Mac. He is a small-time crook, but he is known to dabble in more serious things. There are rumors he has been involved in document forgery and identity theft. Some say he works with people who want to manipulate financial records and personal documents." Jack's heart skipped a beat as he recalled the package with the personal documents he'd seen earlier. The package for Ashley, it had her driver's license, her birth certificate, even her social security card. Someone is trying to mess with her identity. Officer Thompson nodded gravely. "That is what we're thinking. It appears that Brandon and maybe even someone else might be involved in a scheme to steal identities or wipe out records. And if Marcus Simmons is involved, that could mean this is part of a larger, more dangerous operation. Jack exhaled slowly, a mix of frustration and resolve burning in his chest. I'll keep digging on my end. I'll talk to some neighbors, check out any suspicious activity. I won't let this go, not when it sounds so close to hurting innocent people. Thompson clapped Jack on the shoulder. I appreciate it, Jack. You've always had a knack for noticing the small things, the details that others miss. Just be careful. As Thompson left, Jack sat alone with his thoughts. The weight of the mystery pressed on him, but so did his unwavering commitment to do what was right. He stared at the note one last time, silently promising that he would uncover the truth behind the desperate plea and protect those caught in its wake. That night, as the wind whispered through the barren branches of old oak trees, and the distant hum of crickets filled the air, Jack finally allowed himself to drift into a restless sleep. In his dreams, images of frightened eyes, desperate notes, and shadowy figures danced in a chaotic waltz, a premonition of the challenges that lay ahead. Morning in Clearwater broke with a crisp edge, as if nature itself was bracing for the storm of revelations to come. Jack awoke early, determined to follow every lead. He decided to start his day by visiting Mama's kitchen once more, not just for coffee, but to glean any information from the locals, who often knew more than they let on. Inside the diner, the atmosphere was warm and bustling. Regulars filled the booths, and the clatter of dishes and laughter mingled with hushed conversations. Jack took a seat at a corner table and ordered a second cup of coffee, his eyes scanning the room for anyone who might have noticed something unusual on Magnolia Lane or Pine Street. Sally, always the friendly face, approached him with a knowing look. Back again, Jack? You look like you're on a mission. Jack smiled faintly. You know me, Sally. I can't help but notice when something isn't right. Have you heard anything odd around town lately? Sally leaned in, lowering her voice. Well, there has been talk rumors, really about some strange deliveries and people acting off. A few folks mentioned that they've seen the same car lurking around, one with high beams that seem to follow you. And there has been more than one complaint about missing groceries and odd packages arriving. Jack scribbled furiously on a napkin. A car with high beams missing groceries, that fits with what I've seen. Thanks, Sally. As the morning wore on, Jack left the diner with a renewed sense of purpose. He drove slowly through Clearwater's streets, stopping by local shops, chatting briefly with the owners, and even making a quick visit to the post office to see if there were any unusual reports. The postmaster confirmed that, aside from the routine chaos of mail delivery, nothing out of the ordinary had been reported. Yet Jack knew better. He could feel it in every uneasy detail. By early afternoon, Jack returned to his truck, parked near the Green residence. Determined to speak with anyone who might shed light on Brandon Green's erratic behavior, he started knocking on doors of neighboring houses. One elderly gentleman, Mr. Henderson, greeted him on his porch. His eyes, clouded with years of wisdom, regarded Jack kindly. Son, you're always looking out for others, Mr. Henderson said, inviting Jack in for a glass of iced tea. Now, I haven't seen much change around the Green place, but I did notice that Brandon has been coming and going at odd hours. Sometimes late into the night, mind you. Folks around here don't usually like that. Jack nodded, scribbling down the details. Do you know if he has been with anyone, any strange characters? Mr. Henderson shook his head slowly. I can't say for sure, but there's a rumor about a fella named Marcus Simmons. He is not someone you'd want to cross paths with. I've heard whispers that he has been seen near the greenhouse a couple of times. The name sent a chill through Jack. Thank you, Mr. Henderson. That is very helpful. With each conversation, The pieces of the puzzle began to form a murky picture. By late afternoon, Jack had collected enough hints to convince him that the situation was far more dangerous than a simple case of neglect. As dusk approached, and the long shadows of the Texas evening crept over Clearwater, Jack knew that the real test was only beginning. Driving back to his apartment, Jack's mind churned with thoughts of what lay ahead. He was determined to protect Ashley and her children, even if it meant risking his own safety. The quiet town of Clearwater, with its quaint facades and hidden darkness, had become a battleground of secrets and survival, and Jack Morgan was ready to fight for justice. In the stillness of that night, under a star-studded sky and the silent watch of ancient oaks, Jack promised himself one thing. He would uncover every hidden truth, piece by piece, until no more shadows remained. The dark, starry night of Clearwater gave way to a somber dawn as Jack Morgan awoke with a persistent heaviness weighing on his heart. The events of the previous day frightened children, desperate pleas scribbled on a crumpled note, and hushed whispers of dangerous names reverberated in his mind like an unyielding echo. Today, he vowed, he would dig deeper. Jack's small motel room was modest but comforting. The early light filtered through the thin curtains as he sat at the rickety table with his well-worn notepad spread before him. The scribbled lines, names, and addresses formed a tangled web of clues. Magnolia Lane, 312 desperate note, frightened children. Pine Street, 217 mysterious Mr. Parker. Brandon Green erratic, unconvincing. Ashley Green a mother trapped by secrets and fear. Marcus Max Simmons, the name whispered by Mr. Henderson. He reread every detail from yesterday, determined to leave no stone unturned. Jack's instinct told him that the truth was buried somewhere deep in the underbelly of Clearwater, a truth that threatened to unravel the lives of those he'd come to care about. With renewed resolve, Jack left his motel and headed straight to Mama's kitchen. The diner, with its faded neon sign and comforting hum of chatter, served as the unofficial pulse of Clearwater. Inside, familiar faces looked up as Jack took his usual seat in a quiet corner. Sally, wiping down the counter behind the cash register, offered a warm smile. "Morning, Jack. You look like you've been running on empty again." Jack chuckled softly. "Something like that, Sally. I need a little extra jolt of coffee today. Have you heard any more about the Green situation?" Sally leaned in as she refilled his cup. "I did catch a few folks talking this morning. Old Mrs. Carter mentioned that she saw a dark sedan creeping around Magnolia Lane late last night, headlights blazing like a warning. And some of the younger ones say they've noticed strange figures near the back of the greenhouse. Folks are whispering about it, something about secret meetings and hushed conversations." Jack's eyes narrowed. "A dark sedan? That fits with what I heard from Mr. Henderson about odd cars." "Thanks, Sally. Keep your ear to the ground, will ya?" After finishing his coffee, Jack stepped back into the brisk morning air, determined to follow these new leads. He drove slowly through Clearwater, his truck's headlights sweeping over familiar streets now tinted with a sense of foreboding. His first stop was the home of Mr. Henderson, a tidy, time-worn house at the corner of Elm and Fifth. Mr. Henderson, a retired schoolteacher with gentle eyes and a voice soft with wisdom, welcomed Jack into his modest living room filled with framed photos and well-loved books. Over iced tea, Henderson recounted his observations in a low, measured tone. "Jack, I've lived here in Clearwater all my life. I've seen plenty of things, but it's different. Brendan Green has been acting peculiar, coming home at odd hours, sometimes with a look like he is hiding something. And those cars, there's a particular dark sedan I've seen parked near the old warehouse on West Jefferson. It's been there more than once, and I can tell you, it doesn't belong." Jack scribbled down every word. "A warehouse on West Jefferson, you say? That might be worth checking out. Anything else?" Mr. Henderson frowned slightly. I also heard a rumor that Marcus Simmons, or Mac as some call him, has been spotted near the same area. He is no stranger to trouble, and if he is involved with the Green family, it might explain a lot." Thanking Mr. Henderson, Jack left with a renewed sense of urgency. He set his course for West Jefferson, a desolate stretch on the outskirts of Clearwater known for its abandoned warehouses and a history of illicit dealings. The contrast was stark. While most of Clearwater exuded the comforting warmth of small-town life, this part of town was draped in shadows and secrets. Driving slowly through the rougher part of town, Jack couldn't help but notice the faded graffiti on crumbling brick walls, the sound of distant sirens, and the occasional glint of a vehicle's high beams disappearing around a corner. His eyes scanned the environment with a cautious vigilance. Finally, he arrived in front of an old warehouse. Its corrugated metal walls and broken windows hinted at years of neglect. Jack parked a few blocks away and approached on foot, keeping a low profile as he surveyed the area. A dark sedan, as described by Mr. Henderson, was parked a short distance away, its engine cold and its headlights off. Jack crept closer, his heart pounding. He peered around a stack of discarded crates. A couple of shadowy figures exchanged furtive glances near the sedan, their voices hushed and tense. Jack caught snippets of their conversation, words like documents, identity, and deadline floated into his ears. His pulse quickened. This was no ordinary run-of-the-mill delivery error. Unable to capture every word, Jack took out his phone and snapped a few discreet photos. He knew this evidence could be crucial later on. Just then, one of the figures noticed a slight movement. "Did you see that?" a low voice murmured. Jack froze behind a pile of crates, holding his breath. The figure glanced in his direction for a heartbeat longer before dismissing it with a curt nod. The tension in the air was palpable, and Jack realized he needed to be extremely cautious. Retreating slowly, he returned to his truck and drove back to town. As he navigated the familiar streets, his mind was awash with questions. Who were those figures? What were they plotting with those documents? And how did this tie back to Brandon Green and the desperate note at Magnolia Lane? Later that afternoon, after a brief stop at his modest apartment to review the photos and jot down further notes, Jack decided to pay another visit to the Green residence. The late afternoon light lent a melancholy glow to the old house at 312 Magnolia Lane. Ashley Green was standing outside, watching as neighbors milled about, some offering consoling words, others whispering in hushed tones. Jack approached gently. "Ashley," he said, his tone soft yet insistent. "I've been gathering some information. I need to ask you a few more questions if you don't mind." Ashley looked up, her eyes red-rimmed but determined. "Jack, I appreciate everything you've done. What did you find?" He hesitated for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "I spoke with a few neighbors. There are reports of strange cars around, and someone mentioned seeing a dark sedan near an old warehouse on West Jefferson. Have you noticed anything unusual, any visits, any odd behavior from Brandon?" Ashley's face tightened. "Brandon has been different. He has come home late, and when he does, he is distant, agitated. I can't shake the feeling that he is hiding something. And last night, I heard him arguing on the phone, a voice that wasn't his own. I was too scared to confront him." Jack's eyes narrowed with concern. "Do you think it might be connected to the documents? The one sent to your old address?" Ashley nodded slowly. "I don't understand it all, Jack. It's as if someone is trying to erase who I am, our history, our identity. I'm terrified of what Brandon might be planning. I just want my girls to be safe." Jack placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "We'll get to the bottom of this, Ashley. I promise you that I'll do everything I can to protect you and the kids." As the evening deepened into twilight, Jack returned to his truck with a heavy heart and a mind racing with the day's revelations. He dialed Eddie on his radio. Eddie, I need you to keep an eye on things at the depot. I'm following a lead on West Jefferson. Something big is brewing there. I'll call you if anything changes." The reply was brief and supportive. "Be careful out there, Jack. You know we've got your back." That night, as rain began to patter softly against the windshield of his parked truck, Jack sat alone under a flickering street lamp, reviewing his notes. He replayed the conversations in his head, the soft pleas of the twins, Ashley's tearful confessions, Mr. Henderson's warning about Marcus Simmons, and the images he had captured at the warehouse. The puzzle was slowly coming together, but there were still too many missing pieces. In the quiet solitude, the rumble of an approaching vehicle startled him. Jack tensed, instinctively reaching for his phone. A familiar voice came through, a soft, measured tone that immediately put him at ease. "Jack, it's Officer Thompson. I just got a tip that there has been more movement at the Green residence. Some neighbors mentioned seeing a black SUV parked across the street with tinted windows. We're dispatching a unit to check it out. You might want to hold tight." Jack's eyes narrowed. "A black SUV? That wasn't here when I was there earlier." "I'll keep watching." The officer's voice was firm. "Stay safe, Jack. And keep us posted if you see anything else unusual." Jack settled back into his seat, the raindrops a gentle lullaby against the metal of his truck, but his mind was anything but at rest. He knew that tomorrow would bring more answers, or perhaps more questions. The storm of secrets in Clearwater was gathering strength, and he was determined to be ready for whatever came next. As the night deepened and the rain eased into a quiet drizzle, Jack closed his eyes for a moment, allowing exhaustion to overtake him. But in his dreams, he saw flickering images: a dark sedan on an empty street, a pair of frightened eyes, the whispered words, "We need help." And he vowed, even in sleep, that he would not rest until the truth was brought to light. Jack Morgan woke before dawn the next day, the chill in the air belying the humid warmth of Clearwater's afternoons. Determined to follow up on every lead, he started his truck and drove in silence toward the area near the Green residence, where whispers of a black SUV had unsettled the community. The early light revealed the streets of Clearwater in a new, cautious hue, each shadow hinting at secrets yet untold. Jack's mind replayed Officer Thompson's message from the previous night. A black SUV with tinted windows had been seen parked across from the greenhouse, an unusual presence that hadn't been there during his last visit. As he maneuvered his truck through the quiet streets, his thoughts drifted back to Ashley's tearful recounting of Brandon's erratic behavior and the chilling note attached to her package. Something about it all smelt of a larger, more dangerous conspiracy, one that reached deep into the heart of Clearwater's underbelly. Arriving at Magnolia Lane, Jack parked a few houses down from 312. The house itself looked more forlorn than before, the peeling paint and sagging porch seeming to echo the sorrow that now haunted its inhabitants. He walked slowly along the sidewalk, his boots echoing on the cracked pavement. His eyes darted between closed windows and doorways, half expecting to see the dark sedan lurking at any moment. As he approached the greenhouse, Jack noticed a figure sitting on the front steps, a man in a worn denim jacket and a battered baseball cap, his gaze fixed on the horizon. Jack recognized him as Carl, a longtime neighbor known for his straightforward nature and deep concern for the community. "Morning, Carl," Jack greeted softly as he approached. Carl looked up, his eyes shadowed with worry. "Jack, you heading back here? I thought you'd have left after yesterday's mess." Jack sighed, glancing at the house. "I couldn't shake the feeling that there's more to this than meets the eye. I got a tip about a black SUV near here last night. You seen anything unusual?" Carl leaned forward, lowering his voice. "I did, actually. Late last night, I saw it parked just across the street. Didn't think much of it at first, but now, well, you know how things have been." He paused, tapping a weathered finger on his knee. There is also talk among the folks about a man they call Mac Marcus Simmons. They say he has been around, sniffing for trouble. Jack nodded, absorbing every word. Thanks, Carl. Stay safe, and call me if you notice anything else. With Carl's information echoing in his mind, Jack walked up to the green front door and rapped lightly. The door opened a crack to reveal Ashley Green, her face drawn with fatigue and worry. Her eyes, which had once carried hope, now looked burdened by secrets. Jack, she said, her voice barely a whisper. I'm glad you're here again. He offered a gentle smile and stepped inside. The living room was dim, decorated with faded family portraits and trinkets that whispered of better times. The twins, Emily and Lily, sat quietly on a worn sofa, their eyes shifting between their mother and Jack as if searching for reassurance. Ashley led Jack to the small kitchen where they could talk privately. I've been trying to figure out what is happening, she began, wringing her hands. Last night, after you left, Brandon came back late. I heard him arguing on the phone again. This time, he sounded angry, and there was something in his tone like he was giving orders. Jack's gaze hardened with concern. Orders? Orders for what? Ashley hesitated before continuing. I don't know exactly. But I overheard him say something about getting the documents ready and making a clean sweep. I'm terrified, Jack. I feel like I'm losing control of everything. Jack reached out, placing a reassuring hand on her arm. We'll get to the bottom of this. I'm going to follow every lead I have, and I'll make sure your girls are safe. Ashley managed a small, grateful nod. Thank you. I'm so tired of living in fear. After leaving the Green residence, Jack's next destination was the area around West Jefferson, where Mr. Henderson's warning about an old warehouse had come into sharper focus. The warehouse district, long abandoned by legitimate business, was a stark contrast to the tidy streets of Clearwater. Here, broken glass, rusted metal, and the remnants of past glories lay scattered in quiet decay. Jack parked his truck discreetly a few blocks away and proceeded on foot. The distant hum of industrial sounds and the clatter of dripping water provided a grim soundtrack to his investigation. His eyes scanned the area, alert for any movement. After several minutes of cautious exploration, he found himself near a large, dilapidated warehouse. Its corrugated metal siding was streaked with graffiti, and several windows were shattered, allowing a cold wind to swirl inside. He circled the building slowly, eventually spotting a dark sedan parked in a shadowed corner behind a cluster of dumpsters. The vehicle's tinted windows obscured any view of its occupants. Jack crouched behind a rusted dumpster, straining to catch any sounds or movements. Faint voices emerged from the gloom, a low, urgent conversation that sent chills down his spine. We need those documents by tonight. No more delays. You know what is at stake. Don't worry, Mac. I've got everything. Once we deliver, it's over. No one will be able to trace it back. Make sure you cover your tracks. The Green situation, it's more complicated than we thought. Jack's pulse quickened. He fumbled for his phone and took several discreet photos, zooming in on the vehicle and the figure standing nearby. Their words, though fragmented, confirmed his worst suspicions. A clandestine operation was in motion, one that involved identity theft and possibly even more sinister plans. The mention of covering tracks and the Green situation struck him as a direct threat to Ashley and her children. As the voices faded into the murky air, Jack carefully retraced his steps and returned to his truck. With trembling hands, he reviewed the photos and made notes on his notepad. He needed to report this to Officer Thompson, but he also knew he had to be cautious. The less evidence he left behind, the safer everyone would be. Back in his truck, Jack's radio crackled to life. "Jack, you there? This is Eddie," came the familiar voice. "I just got word from a source that there's been a break-in at a storage unit near the Green property. They're saying some personal documents were stolen. You better check it out. Jack's heart sank. The stolen documents could be part of the same operation he'd just witnessed. Copy that, Eddie. I'm on my way, he replied, already setting a course for the storage facility on the outskirts of Clearwater. The storage unit complex was a nondescript series of metal doors lined up in a row, their numbers peeling away in the relentless Texan sun. Jack parked a short distance away and approached the nearest door, noticing signs of forced entry scratches and dents that spoke of hurried, clumsy damage. The lock was broken, and a chill ran down his spine as he realized that someone had been searching for something valuable inside. Inside, the unit was dimly lit and filled with boxes, old furniture, and miscellaneous belongings. Jack's flashlight beam swept across the room, landing on an overturned box with papers scattered on the concrete floor. He carefully gathered a few envelopes and documents, noticing the familiar handwriting from the note, a desperate plea hidden among mundane records. They included copies of personal identification documents, bank statements, and old legal papers. It was as if someone had been meticulously collecting and then stealing the very essence of someone's identity. His phone buzzed again, this time with a text message from Officer Thompson. Jack, we're on our way. Secure any evidence you find and don't touch anything. This case just got a lot bigger. Jack acknowledged the message with a quick reply and secured the evidence as best as he could without disturbing the scene. The documents were carefully placed in a plastic bag, and he took several more photos of the storage unit's interior. He noted every detail: the broken lock, the scattered papers, and even a faint smear of what looked like engine oil on one of the boxes. Had someone tampered with vehicles to sabotage deliveries? The implications raced through his mind. Exiting the storage facility, Jack headed back to his truck, where the late afternoon sun was beginning to dip below the horizon. As he drove back toward the heart of Clearwater, the streets seemed to blur together, each one whispering its own tale of hidden danger and silent complicity. His thoughts were a jumble of fear, determination, and a sense of impending responsibility. Every lead he followed only deepened the mystery, and he knew that the stakes were higher than ever. Later that evening, back at his modest apartment, Jack sat at his small desk under the weak glow of a desk lamp. He spread out all the evidence he had collected: photos of the dark sedan, the overheard conversation, notes from Mr. Henderson, and the stolen documents from the storage unit. The pieces of the puzzle formed a chaotic mosaic, a network of criminal activity that reached from the seedy warehouses of West Jefferson to the quiet, troubled home of Ashley Green. Jack's phone rang, interrupting his concentrated thoughts. It was Officer Thompson. Jack, we need to meet. I've gathered additional intel from the station. There is evidence that Marcus Simmons might be directly involved with Brandon Green. We've also recovered surveillance footage from a nearby gas station showing Brandon and a man matching Marcus Simmons' description leaving the Green residence late last night. Jack's voice was firm. I'm on my way, officer. I'll be there in 20 minutes. He shut down his notepad and hurried out the door, his mind already racing through the implications of this new evidence. The surveillance footage could be the breakthrough needed to confirm that Brandon wasn't acting alone. Driving through the dimly lit streets, Jack's thoughts churned. The town he'd always known as a safe haven now seemed to hide layers of deceit. Every corner, every whispered conversation among neighbors, pointed to a deeper conspiracy. The stolen documents were more than just a means to create fake identities, they were the keys to erasing a person's past, a tool to manipulate life itself. And if Marcus Simmons was involved, then the danger was not confined to just one troubled family, it threatened the very fabric of Clearwater's community. At the police station, Officer Thompson greeted Jack with a grave nod. In a quiet conference room, The two men reviewed the surveillance footage on a small monitor. The grainy images showed a late-night scene. Brandon Green, visibly agitated, stepping out of the greenhouse and meeting with a man in a dark leather jacket whose face was partly obscured. The man's mannerisms, the way he spoke to Brandon in hushed, urgent tones, confirmed what the rumors had long suggested: there was an alliance at work, and it was as dangerous as it was covert. "Look at this," Officer Thompson said, pointing at the screen. Brandon seems to be handing over something, a small envelope, maybe documents. And listen, the man's voice, it's rough, dismissive. He says something like, "Make sure no one finds out." It's chilling. Jack leaned forward, his heart pounding in his chest. "That envelope, could it be the same documents we found at the storage unit?" he asked quietly. "This isn't just about identity theft, it's about erasing someone's history, their very self." Officer Thompson's eyes met Jack's. "Exactly. And if Marcus Simmons is behind this, he could be planning something much larger. We need to act fast before more damage is done." Over the next few hours, Jack and Officer Thompson coordinated with other detectives. They compiled all the evidence, cross-referenced witness statements, and prepared to move in on a location that had emerged as a potential hub for Marcus Simmons' operations, a rundown building on the outskirts of town known as the Old Carter Warehouse. The detectives planned a discreet surveillance operation to monitor activity at the building, hoping to catch Simmons or his associates in the act. As night descended once again over Clearwater, Jack returned to his truck, parked on a quiet side street near the warehouse district. He sat in silence, the soft hum of the engine and the distant murmur of police radios blending with his racing thoughts. In the rearview mirror, he could just make out the dark silhouette of the warehouse, a silent, foreboding sentinel guarding secrets of its own. Inside the truck, Jack reviewed his notes one last time. The stakes were enormous now. Ashley's life, her identity, and the safety of her two daughters hung in the balance. He thought about the frightened eyes of Emily and Lily, about Ashley's quiet desperation, and the overwhelming need for truth and justice. Every piece of evidence was a promise that the shadows haunting Clearwater would be illuminated, no matter how dark they were. Jack's resolve hardened as he looked out into the night. "I won't let them erase you," he murmured to himself, imagining Ashley and her daughter safe and free from the clutches of deceit. "Not on my watch." The silence was broken by the static-laden voice of Eddie over the radio. "Jack, keep your head on a swivel. I'm picking up chatter that a black SUV just rolled past your location. Could be Simmons' crew moving around. Be careful." Jack acknowledged the warning and adjusted his position, his eyes scanning every shadow and flicker of movement. He was now fully immersed in a game of cat and mouse, where every step could reveal a clue or expose a danger. At that moment, his phone buzzed with a message from Ashley. "I'm scared, Jack. Brandon has been acting even stranger today. Please, if you find anything, call me immediately." Jack's heart clenched at the raw emotion in her words. He quickly texted back, "I'm on it. Stay safe and keep the girls close. I'll update you soon." With renewed determination, Jack drove slowly toward the warehouse district, every mile drawing him closer to the truth. The night was thick with tension, and the quiet hum of his truck was punctuated by the distant sounds of city life and the sporadic calls of nocturnal animals. The Old Carter Warehouse loomed ahead, like a dark monument to hidden sins. Jack parked a short distance away, pulling his truck into a discreet side street, and moved on foot once more. Creeping along the perimeter of the warehouse, Jack found a vantage point behind a stack of old shipping containers. From his hidden position, he could see the building's battered facade and a single light flickering inside. He pulled out his phone to take more photos and noted the license plate of a black SUV parked near the loading dock. His heart raced as he watched two figures moving cautiously near the door. Suddenly, A voice crackled from his earpiece. "Jack, this is Officer Thompson. We've got a team set up on your flank. Report any suspicious activity immediately." Jack whispered, "Copy that. I see movement by the loading dock. 2 individuals, maybe going in. I'm keeping a low profile." He strained his ears, catching snippets of hushed conversation from his concealed spot. Words like shipment, erase, and final step floated in the air. The conversation was low, but its urgency was unmistakable. Jack's eyes widened as one of the figures pulled out a small briefcase from under a jacket. His instinct screamed that this was the moment he'd been waiting for. Without a moment's hesitation, Jack tapped his radio. "Officer Thompson, I have visual on 2 suspects at the loading dock of the old Carter warehouse. They're handling a briefcase, possibly documents. Requesting immediate backup." The response was swift. Within minutes, the sound of approaching sirens and the flash of blue and red lights pierced the night's stillness. Jack quickly retreated to a safer distance as police vehicles converged on the warehouse. He observed from his hidden spot as officers in tactical gear moved in, surrounding the building and securing the perimeter. The ensuing operation was swift and efficient. Jack watched as the police burst into the warehouse, apprehending the 2 figures without a moment's hesitation. The briefcase was recovered, and an officer immediately began interrogating one of the suspects. Through the muffled commotion, Jack could catch fragments of their confessions, references to covering our tracks, the green files, and a fresh start. It was clear that Marcus Simmons and his associates were planning to use stolen documents to not only erase identities, but to forge new beginnings for a select few, at the expense of countless lives. As the operation wound down, and the suspects were led away in handcuffs, Officer Thompson approached Jack. "Good work, Jack. Your tip helped us secure this evidence. We're still piecing everything together, but this confirms a lot of what we suspected." Jack nodded, his face grim. "I'm just trying to do what is right. Ashley and her girls, they deserve to have their lives intact." Officer Thompson placed a reassuring hand on Jack's shoulder. "We'll get to the bottom of this. For now, take care of yourself, and don't hesitate to call if you see anything else." Driving back through the darkened streets of Clearwater, Jack's mind was a whirlwind of thoughts. The evidence from the warehouse, the stolen documents, and the confirmed involvement of Marcus Simmons had all pointed to a grander scheme than he had imagined. It wasn't just about one troubled family anymore. It was a web of deceit that threatened the very foundation of the community. Late that night, back at his apartment, Jack sat at his desk under the dim glow of his desk lamp. He reviewed every piece of evidence he had gathered, cross-referencing photos, witness statements, and his own notes. The puzzle was beginning to take shape. Brandon Green, under the influence of Marcus Simmons, was part of a plan to strip Ashley Green of her identity and start over with forged documents. And if that was true, then there were more victims in the wings, people whose lives were about to be erased without their knowledge. Jack's phone buzzed again, this time a call from Ashley. Her voice trembled over the line. "Jack, I think Brandon is coming home early today. I'm scared. The girls are crying, and I don't know what to do." Jack's voice was calm but urgent. "Ashley, listen to me. Get the girls to a safe place, perhaps a neighbor's house or anywhere secure. I'm on my way to you. Stay on the line." Ashley's reply was a series of soft, panicked breaths. Jack reassured her, promising that he would be there in moments. Without delay, Jack grabbed his keys and headed out into the night. The roads of Clearwater were quiet now, the earlier turmoil giving way to an eerie calm. As he drove toward the Green residence, every turn of the wheel felt heavy with responsibility. His mind raced with scenarios. What if Brandon discovered the investigation? What if Marcus Simmons was still lurking nearby, ready to silence anyone who threatened their plan? When Jack arrived at the greenhouse, he found the front door ajar. His pulse quickened. Parking discreetly, he moved cautiously up the steps and peered inside. The living room was dimly lit, shadows stretching across the worn carpet. In the silence, faint sounds of crying could be heard from upstairs. Jack's instincts told him that time was of the essence. "Ashley?" he called softly as he stepped inside, his voice steady but full of concern. A moment later, he heard a rustling from the staircase. Ashley appeared, her eyes wide with fear, clutching the hands of Emily and Lily. "Jack, thank goodness," she whispered urgently. "I managed to get the girls to the back room, but I heard Brandon coming." Jack's eyes scanned the house, noting signs of a hasty departure: a knocked-over chair, a discarded phone on the floor. "We need to get you out of here," he said firmly, guiding them toward the back door. "I'll stay here and keep an eye out. You all head to my truck." As Ashley led the trembling children outside, Jack took one last look at the house. His gut told him that the night's events were far from over, that the true danger was only beginning to surface. He followed them to his truck, parked discreetly across the street, and ensured that they were safely inside before dialing Officer Thompson once more. "Officer, this is Jack. I just got Ashley and the girls out of the house. Brandon might have been here, but they're safe for now. I need you to send someone to secure the Green residence immediately," he said in a hushed tone. The response was immediate. "Copy that, Jack. Backup is on the way. Stay with them and keep the area secure until we arrive." Jack settled the frightened family inside the truck, offering them extra blankets and soothing words. In that cramped space, the soft whimpers of the children mingled with Ashley's quiet assurances. Jack felt a surge of protective resolve. "You're safe now. I'm here," he said repeatedly, his voice a steady anchor in the storm of their fear. As dawn began to creep over Clearwater, casting pale light on the night's turmoil, Jack looked out through the truck's window. The evidence of last night, the warehouse raid, the stolen documents, the whispered names of conspirators had all converged into a single, undeniable truth. There was a sinister network at work, and it was far from finished. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for what lay ahead. "We're going to get through this," he vowed quietly, more to himself than anyone else. In the following days, as the investigation gathered momentum, and the community of Clearwater grappled with the shocking revelations, Jack found himself at the center of a battle for truth and justice. With every lead he followed and every piece of evidence uncovered, the ties that bound the criminals to the vulnerable began to unravel. And though danger lurked around every corner, Jack Morgan's unwavering commitment to protect those in need shone like a beacon in the gathering darkness. Jack's hands still trembled from the events of the previous night as he sat in his truck outside the Green residence. Dawn's weak light struggled to push away the remnants of darkness from the night before, yet the early morning still carried an uneasy chill. The subdued hum of police radios and distant murmurs of conversation confirmed that the investigation was far from over. Somewhere in Clearwater, the intricate web of deceit that had upended the lives of Ashley Green and her children was beginning to unravel. Inside the truck, Ashley and the twins Emily and Lily remained huddled together. Blankets, hastily provided by Jack, offered little comfort against the heavy weight of uncertainty and fear. Ashley's eyes, though tired and sorrowful, burned with determination as she listened to Jack's steady reassurances. "I promise you," Jack said softly, "we'll get to the bottom of this. I won't let anyone erase your past or hurt your girls." Her voice, quivering yet resolute, responded, "Thank you, Jack. I'm so afraid of what Brandon and those men might do next." Jack's gaze hardened as he stared out the window at the awakening town. "I know, Ashley. I'm already coordinating with Officer Thompson and the rest of the team. We've got new evidence from the warehouse, and the storage unit. And something tells me that Marcus Simmons isn't the only one pulling the strings. Later that morning, in the bustling precinct of Clearwater's police station, Officer Thompson and Detective Roberts huddled over a table covered in printed surveillance images, handwritten notes, and digital photographs. The evidence from the warehouse raid, grainy footage, whispered confessions, and the recovered briefcase had stirred up a storm of questions. Detective Roberts tapped a photo of a dark sedan parked outside the old Carter warehouse. "This vehicle has been seen in connection with multiple incidents in the area," he explained, his tone measured and grave. "We believe it's used by Marcus Simmons' crew to transport stolen documents. And with the new information about Brandon Green's phone calls and late-night departures, it's becoming increasingly clear that there's a larger network at play." Officer Thompson, leaning back in his chair, added, "We've got a suspect in custody who claims to have been an intermediary for Simmons. If his confession holds any weight, then Brandon isn't acting alone. Someone is orchestrating the theft of personal documents and identity manipulation, maybe even planning to forge new lives for certain individuals at the expense of others." Thompson's eyes met Roberts'. "This is no isolated case. We're looking at a conspiracy that could affect dozens, if not hundreds, of lives in this community." Across town, Jack drove slowly through the awakening streets, his mind reeling from the briefing he'd received over the phone from Officer Thompson. He needed to reconnect with Ashley. Their brief conversation over the phone had been laced with urgency. "Ashley, listen. We've got a lead that ties Brandon to a network involved in identity theft and document forgery. I need you to meet me at a secure location, perhaps at the community center where we can talk in private." Ashley's reply was a quiet, determined "okay," punctuated by the soft sobbing of a child in the background. Jack knew that her resolve was hard-won through months of living in fear and uncertainty. He instructed her to take the girls and head to the community center on the far side of town, a place where, in Clearwater, neighbors often gathered for support during hard times. When Jack arrived at the center, the building's large, white walls and open, airy lobby provided a stark contrast to the oppressive atmosphere of the green residence. A few concerned citizens milled about, discussing recent events in hushed tones. Jack quickly spotted Ashley seated near a row of chairs in a quiet corner, the twins playing with a set of worn crayons on a small table beside her. He approached quietly. "Ashley," he said, his tone both gentle and urgent, "I've got some updates that you need to hear." Ashley looked up, her eyes red but resolute. "Jack, please, tell me everything. I'm so scared Brandon's been acting even worse. I just heard him on the phone earlier, shouting. I don't even know what he was saying, but it sounded dangerous." Jack nodded, taking a deep breath before launching into a summary of his recent discoveries. "We've intercepted evidence that ties Brandon directly to a larger operation involving stolen personal documents and forged identities. There's a man by the name of Marcus Simmons at the center of this network. We believe that Simmons' crew has been using stolen documents to wipe out people's pasts, essentially erasing who they are so that they can start fresh on someone else's terms." Ashley's eyes widened in disbelief. "Erase my identity? My history?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "I've worked so hard to build a life for my girls, despite everything. How could anyone do that to me?" Jack reached out, placing a reassuring hand on hers. "I know it sounds unimaginable, but think about it. Those documents we recovered? They weren't just random papers. They were your birth certificate, your driver's license, your social security card. And there were bank statements, legal documents, items that define who you are. If someone can get hold of all that, they can control your entire life." Ashley's eyes filled with tears, but her voice grew stronger. "So what do we do now? How do we stop them?" Jack's jaw set in determination. "We work with the police, we provide all the evidence we have, and we help track down everyone involved. I'm not going to let them win. I'm going to see that justice is done not just for you and your girls, but for everyone who might be targeted next." As the morning wore on, Jack and Ashley formulated a plan. With the help of Officer Thompson, Detective Roberts, and other members of the investigation, they would organize a coordinated effort to dig deeper into the network. Jack was tasked with following up on leads from the surveillance footage, while the detectives prepared to bring in additional suspects for questioning. Before leaving the community center, Ashley took a moment to glance at the twins, who, despite their young age, had already been forced to witness too much. "I promise you," she said softly to Jack as she gathered the children into her arms, "I'll do whatever it takes to protect them. I won't let this nightmare continue." Jack nodded solemnly. "We're going to stop them, Ashley. I won't let you or your girls be erased from this world." That afternoon, the investigation took a dramatic turn. In a secured interrogation room at the police station, a suspect, one of Marcus Simmons' low-level associates, sat handcuffed to a metal chair. His eyes darted nervously between Detective Roberts and Officer Thompson as he reluctantly began to talk. "I was just following orders," the man stammered, his voice barely above a whisper. "Marcus told me to get the documents from the Green Place. He said it was part of a bigger plan, something about starting over, making a clean slate. I never thought it would go this far." Detective Roberts leaned forward, his gaze piercing. "A clean slate for whom? Who exactly was supposed to get a new identity?" The man's eyes shifted, and he muttered, "It wasn't just one person. There were names, lists, people who owed money, people who wanted to disappear. Marcus said he'd help them, erase their pasts, so they could begin anew. But then something went wrong, and Brandon, he got in over his head." Officer Thompson interjected, "So Brandon was acting on Marcus Simmons' orders?" The suspect nodded frantically. "Yes, sir. Brandon was just a middleman. He collected the documents, and Marcus would then use them to create new identities. But when things started to unravel, things got messy. I'm sorry, I didn't want to hurt anyone." The confession sent ripples through the room. Detective Roberts exchanged a glance with Officer Thompson. "This corroborates what we suspected," Roberts said. "Brandon was merely a pawn in a larger scheme. And Marcus Simmons, he is the one we need to bring down." With this confession, the detectives moved swiftly to compile all the evidence and begin planning a raid on the suspected headquarters of Marcus Simmons' operation, a rundown building on the edge of Clearwater that had been under surveillance for weeks. Jack was informed of the impending action. His role as a community informant and concerned citizen had made him a crucial part of the investigation. That evening, as a low, persistent rain began to fall over Clearwater, Jack found himself driving to a nondescript parking lot near the suspected Simmons hideout. The building, once a busy factory, now loomed in decrepitude with broken windows and peeling paint, a physical manifestation of the corruption within. Officer Thompson met Jack at the lot, his expression grave. "Jack, I want you to stay here and monitor the situation. We need all eyes on this. Your insights have been invaluable, and if anything unusual happens, you're the first to know." Jack nodded, his eyes fixed on the dark silhouette of the building. "I understand. I'll keep my phone on and report every little detail." From a concealed vantage point behind an old delivery van, Jack watched as a team of officers, clad in tactical gear, moved silently toward the building's rear entrance. The tension was palpable as they breached the door, and moments later, shouts and the clatter of heavy equipment filled the air. Jack could see figures being apprehended, and his heart pounded with both relief and anxiety. Over the loudspeaker of a police van, an officer announced, "All units, the operation is in progress. Secure the area and await further instructions." Jack's eyes scanned the perimeter. In the dim glow of his flashlight, he noted several individuals being led away in handcuffs, men whose faces, hardened by desperation, spoke of lives ruined by the promise of a new beginning. Among them was a man whose name tag read Marcus Simmons. The sight sent a shock through Jack. The man was gone, his eyes cold and calculating despite his disheveled appearance. He was led into the police van without protest, his gaze meeting Jack's for a brief, charged moment before being silenced by the weight of his fate. Back at the community center later that night, Ashley sat with a group of neighbors who had gathered for an impromptu meeting. The news of the raid and the arrest of several key players had spread quickly. In hushed tones, they discussed the implications of the network's exposure. Some expressed relief that the threat was diminishing, others, however, worried that the damage had already been done. Jack arrived at the center just as the meeting was winding down. Ashley looked up as he entered, her eyes weary but hopeful. "Jack, did they get Simmons?" she asked breathlessly. He offered a small, reassuring smile. "Yes, Ashley. Marcus Simmons is in custody. The police are confident that this raid will dismantle a significant part of the operation." A murmur of relief passed through the room, though tempered by the knowledge of what had already occurred. "And what about Brandon?" Ashley asked softly. "Will he be held accountable for everything that has happened?" Jack's gaze dropped for a moment. "Brandon is still under investigation. The confession we got today shows he was caught in something much bigger than himself. But I'm hopeful that the system will deliver justice, and that you and your girls will finally be free of this nightmare." The community center meeting ended with a sense of cautious optimism. Neighbors exchanged supportive words, promising to keep a watchful eye on one another. Jack left the center with his mind heavy with responsibility, yet buoyed by the knowledge that the tide might finally be turning against the forces that had threatened Clearwater. In the days that followed, Jack continued to work closely with the police, providing his observations and insights. He spent long hours at the station, reviewing additional surveillance footage and cross-referencing witness statements. Each new piece of evidence reinforced the scale of the conspiracy, a network that had infiltrated various corners of Clearwater, preying on the vulnerable by manipulating their identities and erasing their pasts. One rainy afternoon, as Jack sat in a small conference room at the police station, Detective Roberts entered with a folder thick with documents. "Jack, I wanted you to see this," Roberts said, sliding the folder across the table. "We found traces of forged signatures on several documents linked to the green case. It appears that not only were personal documents stolen, but they were altered in a way that could allow someone to assume a completely new identity." Jack flipped through the pages, noting the meticulous alterations, dates, names, and even addresses had been changed. "This is sophisticated work," he remarked quietly. "It's as if they wanted to leave no trace of the original owner." Roberts nodded. "Exactly. And while Brandon may have been a minor player, this kind of forgery requires expertise. We're now looking into individuals with backgrounds in document fraud. It's a long shot, but we might just find someone who can tie all these pieces together." Jack's mind raced with possibilities. The idea that a whole network of criminals was not only erasing identities, but also fabricating new ones was both fascinating and horrifying. "We need to ensure that families like Ashley's are protected," he said firmly. "No one should have to live in fear of losing who they are." Roberts gave a brief, sympathetic nod. "We'll do everything we can. And Jack, thank you for your help. Your instincts and dedication have made a real difference." As Jack left the station that evening, the cool drizzle washed over him, mingling with the exhaustion of the past weeks. He drove slowly through the streets of Clearwater, each familiar landmark now holding the weight of recent events. He thought about the families whose lives had been upended by the conspiracies unfolding around them. In his heart, he knew that his duty extended far beyond his role As a delivery man, it was about protecting the very fabric of community and identity. That night, in the quiet solitude of his apartment, Jack sat at his desk once more, reviewing his notes and the evidence he'd collected. He opened his notepad and wrote a single, resolute line. "We will not let them erase who we are." He stared at the words, letting them sink in. Outside, the rain had ceased, and the first hints of dawn began to glow on the horizon. Jack closed his eyes for a moment, gathering strength for the next phase of the investigation. He knew that the battle was far from over, that there were still shadows to confront and secrets to unearth. But as long as there were people like Ashley and the children who needed protection, he would continue his fight, one delivery, one lead, one truth at a time. Jack's truck rolled slowly through the awakening streets of Clearwater as the first real light of dawn broke over the horizon. The town, scarred by weeks of turmoil and whispered conspiracies, now bore the promise of renewal. In his mind, Jack replayed every moment of the past few days, the clandestine meetings, the desperate pleas of Ashley, and the arrest of Marcus Simmons. He knew that the battle against those who sought to erase identities was finally nearing its end, and with that realization came the hope of rebuilding shattered lives. At the community center that morning, the atmosphere was markedly different from the tense meetings of previous days. Neighbors gathered in clusters, their voices now tinged with cautious optimism. The room, bathed in soft, natural light streaming through tall windows, was filled with gentle murmurs of support and reassurance. Ashley Green, though visibly worn from the ordeal, stood at the front of the room with a quiet determination that radiated strength. The twins, Emily and Lily, sat close to her, their eyes now less fearful and more curious about the new day. Jack arrived just as the community center was beginning to buzz with life. Officer Thompson and Detective Roberts had arranged an informal assembly to update everyone on the recent breakthroughs. Standing near the podium, Detective Roberts cleared his throat and began. "Fellow citizens of Clearwater, over the past few weeks, our community has faced challenges that none of us ever imagined. But today, I am pleased to announce that a major criminal network, one that aimed to steal not just documents, but the very essence of personal identity, has been significantly dismantled. Marcus Simmons, the mastermind behind the identity forgery ring, is in custody, and several accomplices have been arrested. We are working tirelessly to ensure that everyone affected is given the protection and justice they deserve." A ripple of relief passed through the room. Ashley's eyes shimmered with unshed tears as she listened, and Jack felt a surge of pride and resolve. He knew that while the battle had been long and painful, the promise of a fresh start was within reach. After the briefing, people mingled and spoke in hushed tones about the future. Jack found Ashley near a table piled with community flyers about local support services, legal aid, and counseling. He approached her gently. "Ashley, you did incredibly well through all of this," Jack said softly. "Your courage has inspired more than you know." Ashley managed a small, grateful smile. "I couldn't have done it without you, Jack. I've spent so long feeling trapped, as if my past was something to be erased. Now, with all of this coming to light, I feel, if only for the first time in a long while, that I have a future again." Nearby, Officer Thompson joined their conversation. "Ashley, we're setting up a dedicated task force to help victims of identity fraud and domestic abuse. I want you to know that our community is stronger when we support one another. You and your girls deserve every bit of protection and care." Jack nodded in agreement. "We're all in this together. It's time for Clearwater to heal." Later that afternoon, Jack found himself at a small park on the edge of town, a place that had long been a quiet refuge for the community. Under the sprawling branches of an old oak, families gathered for picnics and conversation. The park had become a symbol of resilience. Even after darkness, life would continue, and nature would always reclaim its beauty. Sitting on a worn bench, Jack reviewed his notes one final time. The investigation had unearthed not only the extent of the criminal network, but also the underlying social issues plaguing Clearwater: isolation, economic hardship, and a sense of abandonment that made people vulnerable. In his mind, the case had evolved from one of personal identity theft to a broader reflection of community identity, a reminder that every life, every story mattered. His thoughts were interrupted by the gentle sound of footsteps. Turning, Jack saw Ashley approaching, holding the hands of Emily and Lily. The twins, their faces curious and bright, smiled shyly at him. "Jack," Ashley began, her voice steady now with newfound determination, "I've been thinking. With everything that has happened, maybe it's time we start over, not just for me, but for all of us. I want to rebuild our lives and our community. I want to help others who've been affected by this injustice." Jack felt a warmth spread through him. "That's exactly the spirit we need, Ashley. You're not alone. There are local organizations, community leaders, and even some businesses willing to lend a hand. Let us take this as an opportunity to create something positive out of all the pain." Over the next few weeks, Clearwater began to change. A community initiative, spearheaded by a coalition of local leaders, was launched to support victims of identity theft and domestic abuse. Jack, though still a humble delivery man by trade, emerged as an unexpected hero, a man whose quiet vigilance and determination had saved lives. He found himself volunteering at community centers, organizing neighborhood watches, and even mentoring younger residents on the importance of trust and communication. One crisp autumn evening, as the town prepared for its annual harvest festival, Ashley organized a small gathering at the community center. Lanterns were strung between the trees, and tables were set with homemade dishes donated by neighbors. The festival was meant to be a celebration of survival, a testament to the strength of the community in overcoming adversity. Jack arrived at the festival with a thoughtful smile. As he walked through the vibrant crowd, he caught snippets of conversations filled with hope and laughter, stories of families rebuilding, of relationships mended, of dreams rekindled. He spotted Officer Thompson chatting with Mrs. Carter, a longtime resident who had lost her husband years before and now found solace in community support. Detective Roberts was seen laughing with a group of teenagers, discussing future plans to keep their town safe. In the midst of the festivities, Ashley took Jack aside. "Jack, I can't thank you enough," she said, her eyes reflecting both gratitude and a fierce determination. "You saw something was wrong and you took action. You reminded me that our past doesn't have to define us. With your help and the help of this community, I feel like we're going to have a real chance at a new beginning." Jack's gaze softened as he looked at Ashley and the children, who were now playing near a table laden with apple pies and lemonade. "I'm just glad I could help," he replied modestly. Sometimes, the smallest acts can make the biggest difference. As the evening progressed, speeches were made, and plans for future community projects were announced. The atmosphere was one of solidarity, a shared understanding that while the scars of the past might never fully fade, they could serve as a reminder of what was at stake and the value of protecting one's identity, history, and dignity. Later that night, as the festival came to a close and the crowd slowly dispersed under a starry sky, Jack stood alone by the park's fountain, reflecting on the journey that had brought him to this moment. The river of life in Clearwater flowed steadily, its current carrying away the remnants of despair and replacing them with a promise of new beginnings. He pulled out his notepad and wrote one final entry for the day. "In the heart of Clearwater, amid the chaos of stolen identities and shattered lives, I found a beacon of hope. Our true strength lies not in the ability to erase the past, but in our capacity to honor it and use its lessons to forge a better future. We will stand together, rebuild together, and ensure that no one is ever forced to vanish from their own story." Jack closed his notepad, feeling an overwhelming sense of peace and purpose. The investigation had not only exposed the dark underbelly of a criminal network, but had also revealed the enduring spirit of a community that refused to be defined by its tragedies. Every life mattered, and every story was a thread in the tapestry of Clearwater. In the months that followed, Jack continued his daily rounds with renewed vigor. His role had transformed from that of a routine delivery man to a guardian of his community's hopes and dreams. The police had successfully prosecuted key members of the identity theft ring, and initiatives to support affected families blossomed throughout Clearwater. Ashley, now a vocal advocate for victims of domestic abuse and identity fraud, began speaking at community events. She shared her story with a raw honesty that resonated with many, inspiring others to seek help and rebuild their lives. Emily and Lily, though still young, were given the opportunity to attend counseling and educational programs that helped them regain the innocence that had been so cruelly tarnished. Clearwater itself began to change. Local businesses rallied to sponsor neighborhood watches and community improvement projects. The annual Harvest Festival became not only a celebration of the season, but also a reminder of the resilience and unity that had emerged from the darkness. In every corner of town, the message was clear: no one's identity could ever be stolen, and every life was worth fighting for. One sunny afternoon, as Jack delivered mail along Magnolia Lane, a street that once held so much fear, he stopped by the greenhouse. The home, though modest and still bearing the scars of past neglect, now had a fresh coat of paint and a new, hopeful energy. Ashley stood on the porch, smiling as the twins played with a new set of crayons and paper, their laughter a welcome symphony of hope. "Good morning, Ashley," Jack greeted warmly, handing her a small package addressed to her, a token from a local nonprofit dedicated to community rebuilding. "Morning, Jack," she replied, her smile radiant. "Thank you. Every little bit helps. Today, I feel like we're finally taking back our lives." Jack nodded, feeling the warmth of a new day in every gesture and word. "Keep shining, Ashley. Your strength is what lights the way for all of us." As Jack climbed back into his truck and resumed his route, he couldn't help but think about how far they'd come. The journey had been fraught with danger and heartache, yet it had also brought about profound change. The once hidden shadows of Clearwater had been illuminated by the collective courage of its people, and in that light, a new chapter was being written, one defined by hope, resilience, and the unbreakable bonds of community. In the soft hum of his truck's engine, Jack felt contentment. He had witnessed the transformation of a town, and he knew that, no matter what challenges lay ahead, Clearwater's heart would continue to beat strong. The darkness might come again, but with it, the people would stand together, ready to defend the very essence of who they were. And so, as the day wore on and Jack continued his work, each package a silent promise that every story mattered. Clearwater, Texas, embraced a future where identities were celebrated, and every person was seen, heard, and cherished. Jack Morgan's journey was far from over, but he had found his true calling, protecting the soul of his community, one delivery at a time.